the daughter she was told to bury. Vivian's Secret, the Vivian Cross trilogy, final chapter. A Nemorous story. There's a drawer in Vivian Cross's bedroom that she never let anyone open. Not her sister. Not the women who hunted beside her. Not the lawyers. Not the reporters who came later asking how one woman had chased a con man across 19 years in 4 states until the day the handcuffs finally closed. In that drawer, there is a hospital bracelet, the kind they snap around a newborn's ankle. It is small enough to fit around 2 of your fingers. The ink has faded, but you can still read the date. October 1985. And there is a single knitted bootie. Just one. Yellow, gone soft and gray with handling. Because for 19 years a grown woman held it every single night before she could sleep. Everyone thought they knew why Vivian hunted him. They were wrong. They thought it was the money he stole, the name he ruined, the career he burned to the ground when she was 23 years old and trusted him with everything. But there was one reason she never spoke out loud. One secret she carried past the arrest, past the courtroom, past the very end. The other women, the ones he'd conned, the network of the wronged who finally brought him down, not one of them ever knew. This is that secret. This is the last thing she was hiding. Early CTA. Before we go any further, if stories like this one tend to stay with you, take a moment to subscribe so the next one finds you. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. It always means more than you know to see how far these stories travel. To understand it, you have to go back. Before she was the hunter. Before her name meant a trap 19 years in the making. In 1985, Vivian Cross was not a legend. She was a young accountant with a good laugh and a careful heart. And she had fallen completely the way you only fall once. For a charming man who called himself Curtis. You already know what Curtis was. You've watched him do it before, to Claire, to a dozen women in a dozen towns. But Vivian didn't know yet. To her, in that one bright year, he was simply the man who made the future feel like a place she wanted to go. And then she was pregnant. She used to say that was the happiest she had ever been in her life. She bought yellow yarn, because she didn't want to wait to find out if it was a boy or a girl. She knitted in the evenings while Curtis talked about all the things they'd have one day. She didn't know, then, that none of it was real. That the man beside her was already planning the morning he would disappear. She found out the way they all found out. She woke up, and he was gone, and so was the money, and so was the version of her life she thought she'd been living. She was 8 months pregnant, alone, and ruined. But she still had the baby coming. She still had that. The night her daughter was born, something went wrong. Vivian remembered the pain, and the lights, and the sound of her own voice asking, over and over, "Is she okay? Is she okay?" She remembered a nurse's face that wouldn't meet her eyes. And then she remembered the words. The ones that would live inside her for the rest of her life. It would be kinder if you didn't see her. They told her the baby hadn't survived. They told her it was a mercy, that a frightened, broke, abandoned girl should not have to hold a child she could not keep. So she looked away. She never saw her daughter's face, not her eyes, not her hands, nothing to remember her by, except a date on a bracelet and a single bootie she'd finished knitting 2 days before. She signed the papers a social worker slid in front of her, because she was 23 and grieving and had no one in the world to tell her to stop and read them. She didn't know what she was signing. She thought she was burying a child. She wasn't. Grief does something to a person when it has nowhere to go. Vivian's grief had no grave to visit, no face to remember, nothing to hold but a single yellow bootie and a bracelet with a date on it. So the grief turned the way a river turns when you put a wall in front of it. It turned toward the man who had left her there. That is the engine the world finally saw. 19 years, state after state. Vivian Cross, the woman who would not stop, the accountant who used the very skills he had tried to destroy to follow his paper trail through every false name he ever wore. Everyone thought she was chasing justice. and she was. But underneath it, every mile of it, she was chasing the one question she could never put down. The question that woke her at 3 in the morning, every morning for 19 years. What would she have looked like? The thread came loose by accident. It was a hospital record, pulled in the middle of building her case against him. A discrepancy, a number that didn't match. Vivian, who could read a ledger the way other people read faces, saw it immediately. A baby logged as deceased. And then, on a separate page, in a separate hand, the same baby logged as transferred. Placed. Adopted. She sat in a county records office, and she could not breathe. 2 entries. The same child. One of them said her daughter had died. The other said her daughter had been carried out of that hospital, alive, into someone else's arms. She had been alive the whole time. Alive for the first birthday. The first word. The first day of school Vivian spent in the dark, holding a yellow booty. 19 Octobers. And her daughter had been somewhere in every one of them. There was a moment, Vivian admitted this only once, near the very end, when she almost stopped. Because she realized, sitting in that records office, that her daughter had a life. A name that wasn't the name Vivian had whispered to her belly. A mother, maybe a good one. A whole world that had never had a hole in it shaped like Vivian Cross. And she thought, what right do I have to walk into that? What if I'm only a wound she doesn't remember getting? She came so close to closing the file. But then she thought about the yellow booty. And she thought about her own arms, empty for 19 years. And she understood that her daughter had spent those same 19 years carrying a different lie. That somewhere out there was a mother who gave her away. Vivian could not let her daughter believe that for one more day. She had been told to look away once. She would not do it twice. She found her in a college town, 2 states over. A young woman, 19 years old, October born, studying, and Vivian wept when she learned this, studying numbers. Accounting, the same quiet gift, passed down a bloodline that the girl didn't even know she had. Vivian didn't call. You can't call a stranger and tell her you are her mother. So she did the only thing she had left. She wrote a letter. She wrote it 40 times. She told her daughter the truth, plainly, the way she'd want to be told. That she had not given her away. That she had been told she was gone. That a yellow booty had been held every night for 19 years by a woman who never stopped loving a child she was told to forget. And at the bottom, she wrote the name. The one she had chosen in 1985 and never spoken aloud to a living soul. The name she had whispered just once, to a belly full of yellow yarn and impossible hope. She mailed it, and then she waited at an address, on a quiet street, for an answer she had no right to expect. It ends in a doorway, not in a courtroom, not in a reckoning. Vivian had her reckoning. The world saw that part. But the secret, the real story, the thing none of the other women ever knew, that ended on a small porch on an ordinary afternoon, when a young woman with Vivian's own eyes stood on the step and could not make herself knock. Vivian opened the door before she had to. The 2 of them stood there, 19 years between them, the whole length of a stolen life, folded into the space of a doorway. And her daughter opened her mouth. And the first words she ever said to her mother were the name. The secret name. The one Vivian chose in 1985 and never spoke aloud to a living soul, because saying it would have made the losing real. Her daughter said it back to her. Beat. Hold the silence. And 19 years came down all at once. People always ask why she hunted him so long. Why one woman would give 19 years of her life to catch one man. Now you know it was never only about him. She was looking for him, but she was looking for her. And somewhere in all those miles, the hunt and the love had become the same thing. The same refusal to look away, the same impossible, unkillable hope that the people we lose might still, somehow, be found. The drawer is open now. The bracelet, the booty. She gave them to her daughter, finally, with hands that shook. The other women got their justice. But Vivian Cross got the one thing she had stopped believing was possible. She got to see her face. If she stayed with you tonight, don't let her leave alone. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and the name of someone you would cross 19 years to find. I read every single one. Some stories never leave.